let's get started with this visual doodle note-taking session. So yeah, I'm Anne English, hello, and today I'm going to start with the 5-star standard. So it's the basics that I believe that you should know before you dive into the visual doodle note-taking. What are you hoping to take away from this session? Is it that you're just curious to learn more, or is it that you want to apply this to what it is that you do, and next time that you go to an event and listen to somebody speaking and take visual notes? So this was my notebook on day 17. As I was saying, I sat there in the audience, sat in the front row, which was probably when the last speaker got on the stage. That was a bad move. I realised later that I probably shouldn't have sat in the front row because I was the Anne that was getting picked on. But yeah, the notes that I made, I did them mainly for me. And that's the point really as to what you're doing. When you're making visual doodle notes, unless you're selling them, and I do get commissioned to do them, but unless you're doing it as a job, these can be private to you. So if that little mind monkey's saying to you, oh, I'm not very good at this, I can't draw and stuff, doesn't matter. It's about, as long as you can interpret what you're saying, because if you look back and you can't understand what it means, then obviously that's not brilliant. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to anybody else. So you can see when I've done these, I do have my own style, my own technique that I've developed over the years, because I've always doodled. So literally we're talking about decades. So, I don't want you to compare my today with your today, because I've been doing this a long time. But yeah, these were just the notes when I was hearing things. I didn't know what was coming next. But what I wrote down was the things that resonated with me. Obviously, because I didn't know what was coming next, I was like, am I going to run out of paper? And what I do like to do is try and capture things on one sheet. Because I've done it before where you write pages and pages and pages of notes. And do you ever actually look back at them? But I do find if I do these one-page summaries, I'm likely to flick through them and remember the key points. And that's it. It's about the key points. It's not about every single word. So we're going to start with the 5-star standard. So I'm going to give you pro tips, because this is what I do now for a living. I do doodles of what people say. And I want you to get ready with that pen and paper to hand. However, if you feel like, you know what, I just want to sit back, relax and watch today, and that's fine, because there's going to be a replay, so you can always replay it and get the pen and paper out then. But I am going to invite you to visual doodle along with me. We're not going to sing, but we're going to doodle along, and then capture your ideas as a visual doodle note style. So using either the framework that I've provided, so you could use the framework, which is grayed out, so you've got some shadows to trace over, or freestyle. Doesn't really matter. It's about the art of putting pen to paper. And actually, it's about experiencing the art of visual communications. So I call myself a visual communicator, and I've actually got 3 sides to my business. So I help people to visually communicate what they think, what they say, and what they do. So what you think, it's about that intangible stuff that you can't see. It's about ideas, concepts, framework. And if you think about mind mapping, well, I do that with my clients. I call it vision mapping. And we create vision trees of their businesses, or we might create a signature system, which is their processes. Visual doodles is where I capture stories, journeys, and insights. And visual marketing is where I train people on how to present a brand, their products, their services. So for visual marketing, think about window display, visual merchandising. And actually, when I teach visual marketing, I always start with the 5-star standard. So I thought with visual doodles, it was good to repeat that pattern, because I do believe that these 5-star standards, it sets you up in a good place to then be able to move forward. So yeah, we don't want to run before we can walk. We might be at the stage today where we're just crawling. That's all right. Start somewhere. So this is me. During lockdown, I did a TEDx talk, which was like an amazing thing. I've got a full story on this, and I'm not going to go into it today. But actually, I planted a seed because when I used to love listening to TEDx talks, I did say, if I ever do a TEDx talk, it needs to be visual because I'm a visual communicator. I didn't know at the time that I was going to be able to do drawings like this. I just set the intention. And actually, it happened during lockdown. So, I had plenty time to improve my visual doodles. And when the talk was done, if you do watch it, there's no clapping. I don't think that's because I was that bad. It's just there was no audience. But I just spoke to, there was a camera in the room, there was a film crew. I spoke to that one person that needed to hear my message. And that's what I'm doing today. So I doodled that because I wanted to leave the audience with a gift. With TEDx talks, that's what they say is leave the audience with a gift. So I took that literally and I thought I'm going to leave them with a roadmap. So this is taking my experience as a creative, and for decades, what I've done is taken an idea, you see that idea above my head, from the world of my imagination, made it real, and then all of the twists and turns that you go along the way, myth busting, overcoming negative self-talk. So you can plant those ideas in the land of possibilities. And there's all these twists and turns that I navigate people through. So having done this map, and actually to create my TEDx talk, I always started off with a mind map, a massive mind map. In fact, I can see that James Palmer is in the room. Actually, when it was an idea, James and I got together and I just got Post-it notes, sat there with Post-it notes, just getting all of the ideas out of my head. Because then I expanded that into a vision map, a mind map. That was reduced down to 14 minutes for the talk, but then I could expand it up. So then I expanded that into a 10-week online coaching program. And you can probably see some familiar faces in those groups. And then I looked at the map and I split that up into waypoints, into weeks of the program, which have become chapters of the book. And because I'm creative, I wanted people to not have a workbook because I feel like it shouldn't be work, it should be fun. But I give them pages that they could doodle on. So I took the map and then I broke that down into frameworks, into pages I could doodle on. And that's when I got to know Michael, because I had this vision that not everybody had a printer. So I thought if I could print a book, in this case, Amazon printed the book for us, that could be the workbook for my course. But then what I had to do was you couldn't just release it as a workbook for a course. It had to be a self-guided journal as well. So it's a 2-in-1 thing. Yeah, this was my journey with Write the Book. And I wrote the book. That's Michael there with the unboxing. So not only was I a TEDx speaker, now I'm author. And I'm also a visual doodler. So I didn't want my book to be one of these shelf development books, where it just sits on the shelf and you don't do anything with it. So as well as my online program and my course, I've ran Daydream and Doodle Days. So that takes people through the first chapter. And a lot of people had said to us, can you teach us to doodle? Well, it's something that I naturally do. So this was, the first time that I went out there and taught people. And whilst my book's got a map at the front, in the afternoon, I help people create their own maps of their vision of their world, where they want to be. You might be able to spot there. I think Helen's in the room, Helen John. So yeah, Helen's been on a Daydream and Doodle Day, as have quite a few people that are in the group. What I'd like you to do is put in the chat with the letters A, B, C, D, or E. How do you know me? How do you know the visual doodle techniques? Do you know it? Have you seen this stuff? Or are you just intrigued to know more? So if you use this code, use this key, and then just put letters in the chat. So that's useful to know. And actually, what you're doing, because this is kind of like this is the first bit to visual doodling. Because what you're doing is you're transforming an idea from your head into mine. I've asked you a question, you're replying, but you're replying very, very simple with a letter. But because we've got the code, we all know what that means. And that's what happens with VisualDoodle Note-Taking. It would take you a lot longer to type those sentences out. give yourself permission to visual doodle. Doesn't matter what it looks like, give yourself permission to do it. Then you'll be amazed by the magic that happens, because this was my first visual doodle just before lockdown when I was at an event, but I did it on my iPad instead of in a book. And then the speaker said, put that on social media. And I was like, no, it's rubbish. Why would I share this? You know, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be judged. This was for my consumption only. But you know what? Put it out there, put it on social media. An amazing thing happened, because within a month, I was invited onto Brené Brown's Dare to Lead course with our licensed facilitators in the UK. And then I captured that book as 5 doodles. So I have been on an incredible journey. Some of it I don't believe myself. But you know, the magic that happens when you just actually push yourself out your comfort zone and do something. Let's not compare ourselves, because I was comparing myself to, when I ran a design studio, I was comparing myself to the illustrators. I'm a doodler. But actually what I used to do was I used to come up with the concept ideas, do a doodle sketch, and then give it to them. I realized when I said that it was rubbish, that was because actually at the end of the day, what they did was they took my drawing and they crumpled it up and they threw it in the bin. So it did become rubbish, but it actually served a purpose. It had planted that seed of an idea into their mind. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be planting seeds so that you remember them as well. Because ideas, if we don't write them down, they can easily float off and be forgotten. This is what we're going to end up with. This is what I'm going to teach you. This is what I'm going to share. And you've got this background one if you want to use that. If you don't, then that's absolutely fine. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw along on top of that as I'm talking. So this is going to take a bit of doing, because as I say, I've got to concentrate on drawing and teaching at the same time. But hey, I think we should be able to get there. So I'm going to stop sharing that slide. And I'm going to open up my iPad and get ready. Right. Doodle along with me. So VisualDoodle Note-Taking. Now we do have the benefit that I can pinch and zoom in and zoom out. So I'm going to start at the beginning here. And actually when I write VisualDoodle Note-Taking, my suggestion to you is you just write in your own style. So let's write down the word VisualDoodle Note-Taking in the middle of the page. Now, when I went to art college, I actually trained as a graphic designer. So one of the things that we used to do was learn typography, about fonts. So actually, I make it a bit fancier. Now, if I'm listening along to a talk, I might go back and do this later, or there may be time, there may be a break in the conversation. So what I would invite you to do is draw along and actually go over the letters, make them a bit thicker, because this is the important message. This is the title. So we want the letters to be bold. So what I would do with this is go over the letters and just trace alongside of them. So you're actually thickening up each of the lines. Okay. Now, you might have heard the term serif and sans serif to do with fonts. Sans serif means without a serif. Serif is the little things that kind of almost feet that you get at the end of the letters. So to make it a bit more fancy, what I'm doing is I'm just adding lines onto the end of the letters. I'll leave the O's for now. We'll come back to those. But can you see how all of a sudden my writing, which I don't think looks particularly fancy or brilliant, but when we start doing this, it starts looking a bit more arty. Because we're actually all artists, we're all creatives. But you know, we might have told ourselves that we can't draw, or it might be that somewhere along the line, somebody else has told us that we can't draw. So we want this to be fun. When I see words like doodle or the word look or book, what I also see is two little eyes looking back at us. So if you want to join in with the fun, you could put two eyes in the word doodle. How are we doing? Are we all okay with that? The bit in the middle, I've made my own, I've made my own words with VisualDoodle. I just decided that's what I was going to call it. I call this an impact bubble because I believe that, what happens in the middle, we're going to make an impact today. And every speaker that I listen to have made an impact with me. So this is kind of taken from cartoons. So I'm making convex arced shapes there. And then again, I'm going around them, making it look a bit more arty. And then I can also adjust, if there's any lines that don't add up properly, that don't kind of match. When I go around it a second time, I can tidy it up. Now, obviously on an iPad, I can use a tool because I've got the rubbing out tool up there and I can do that, but I'm not going to do that because that would be cheating. If you've got pen and paper, unless you do have, you're using pencil and you're going to rub it out. I'm actually going to draw along and not use some of those tools so that it looks more like what you can do. Now, I've said this is the impact bubble. I like to make it look 3D. And actually, when I draw these and give it a bit more movement, I'm almost in my head going, pow, 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 It looks like it's something that you would find in a cartoon. If you watch cartoons and then something goes like kapow, then they put lines around that to give it movement. So if we zoom back out, can you see now how in the middle we've kind of defined what this is all about? And then up here, we're going to start with the 5-star standard. I'm just going to write over those words. Start with the 5-star standard because this is what this masterclass is all about. I can almost hear Julie Andrews singing in my head because we're not going to start at the very beginning. We're going to start with a 5-star standard. And again, if we want to make those letters a bit fancier, we can put some dots at the end of it. Because actually, what I do often is I am connecting the dots. When we do the Clarity Quest and Daydream and Doodle Day, it's all about connecting the dots between what you've done, where you are now, and who you want to become. So that's another way of making your lettering look a bit fancier, is to put some little dots at the end. Now, of course, if you're listening along to a speaker and you're trying to make notes, at that time, it may be that you don't have time to do this. But this is kind of like my equivalent also of when I was at school and I used to look out the window when the teacher was talking. Doesn't mean that I'm not listening. Sometimes as we're processing stuff, I'm adding things like that to my doodles as I'm thinking and I'm listening. And then because it's the 5-star standard, let's draw 5 stars. Now, 25 years I did Christmas displays and shopping centres. So I'm actually quite fast at drawing stars because I used to draw a lot of stars. But you can use things like asterisks. You might have actually already used symbols like that in your note-taking. So be an asterisk, you can make a star by using triangles. Doesn't really matter. But I'm going to start here with the 5-star standard. All right. Are we ready to keep going? Is everybody okay? Brilliant. I'm going to start with a story, actually. Where it all began. Now, we're going back thousands of years to caves. We're going back to cave drawings because, actually, visual communications was one of the first ways that we used to communicate. How do we know that? Because the cave drawings existed. That they were drawn it thousands of years back, but they're still there now. People have found them. And often it was interesting how quite often there would be animals, things like cattle. So from cave drawings where people were communicating with each other, I'm going to take you to this. Now, I've drawn triangles there, but actually, what is it that we'll see? Well, hopefully you'll see that as a pyramid, because we're now moving to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians had a thing called hieroglyphics. Now, if I had to write the word hieroglyphics, I'd probably spell it wrong, but I can doodle it. So what I've drawn there is an ox head. In Egyptian times, animals were really important to them because, you know, for food, for ploughing the land, that kind of thing. Ox was actually known as an aleph. So that began with the letter A. And actually, that might have taken a little bit more for you to draw. And also for other people to draw, they simplified that down. So then you've got the ox head with the horns sticking up. But then can you see what happened, how that evolved into the letter A? So we started with pictures, which then became letters, which became words. And in the chat earlier, a lot of you put A as the symbol that you knew you'd seen what I did because of the doodle notes that I'd done. So I'm going to bring you now to present time. And these things that we quite often use in chat. Some drawn faces here. Now, these are emojis. Isn't it interesting how a circle with two dots and then either a line that goes up or a line that goes down? What do we see? We start seeing characters, don't we? We start seeing emotions, but really it's just a couple of lines. This is the reason why I love communicating visually. So drawing a frame here, drawing a box, a double box, and then when I put this on, what do we see? Well, we see a picture, because there is a saying that goes, a picture tells 1,000 words. And this is why I love drawing instead of writing, because also with spelling mistakes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I can't spell hieroglyphics. So are we okay with this? Shall we go on the journey of the 5-star standard? So what I'm going to do is use this arrow to take us along here. And let's start up at this top corner. So the first 5-star that I'm going to draw is to do with less is more, which might seem like a funny thing to say. How can less be more? But actually, we can communicate sometimes more by actually writing less. If you've ever wrote pages and pages of notes, you might find that you never look at them. Again, adding to the lettering, I'm just putting those little serifs on the end, making it fancier because, again, this is a title. What I'm doing here with my visual notes is I'm trying to simplify things that are complex. I'm simplifying complex ideas now. This is a symbol that I use for ideas. Quite a lot of people use the light bulb. We talk about light bulb moments. A lot of drawings, doodling, it's to do with metaphors and symbols. So if you draw your first light bulb there. And you know, when we're talking about visual doodling, it's actually about listening. That's one of the main skills that you need. It's not the skill of drawing, it's the skill of listening. So when I was at day 17, I spent a lot of the time with my head down, putting pen to paper, but listening out for what the speaker was saying. So I was listening as I was doodling. And don't undervalue the importance of the listening side, because most people think that it's about the, well, I can't draw, it's about the doodling. It's about listening first. Because what you're doing is you're listening out for the words that they're saying and the important words that they're saying. Because what you're going to do is you're going to filter those words down. You're not going to write every word. What you're listening out for is the key points. So I'm drawing here a key, like a key that would unlock a treasure chest. I'm going to write the word key points. And you can see also, I do combine drawings with words. What I do also is, if we put these little X's in here, in the boxes, because the things that I don't do, unless it was the title that start with the 5-star standard, words like the, filler words like and, you know, we already use symbols. Quite often we'll use an ampersand or a plus instead of the word and. So in your writing, anyway, you are doing some of this doodle note taking without even realizing it. So that's your first star. You okay? Yeah, because we'll move on to the next one. The next one, we'll put the star here. The second of the 5-star standards is about grouping. And this is something I teach with visual marketing, visual merchandising. It's really important because when we actually are searching for things, if we want to purchase something, whether you realize it or not at this stage, you're actually searching stuff by groups and categories. So for example, the scarf that I'm wearing, if I wanted to buy a scarf, where would I search for a scarf? Well, I'd look at the group, the category that was under. So if I went into a department store, maybe go to the ladies' wear department, then I'd go to accessories, and then I'd decide to search for a scarf. It might be by colour, it might be by design, material, price. If you wanted to get a light for your house, you know, if you're searching in person or online, is it a ceiling lamp? Is it a floor lamp? So we group things together. We categorize things without even realizing it. So what we're listening for is how we can categorize stuff that's being said. And a way of categorizing things is we do it automatically when we write bullet points. So it is about organizing information. Again, though, we don't have to write the full word information. We can write info. It's also about connecting. So when you're connecting things, we can use a connector for that, which would be an arrow. And what we're doing is we're connecting ideas. So there you go. Draw your second light bulb. The light's on here. So we've got those lines coming off like we did with the impact bubble to give us a bit of movement. And then it's about hierarchy. Now, I had to spell check this. I hope I've spelt it right. Hierarchy, I'm presuming, actually probably comes from the word hieroglyphics. But hierarchy is like what's important, and you can do that with style. So have you ever underlined something that was important? Or you might have put a wavy line under it. And actually, as we've been doing this doodle, we have been grouping ideas together. You can see that the 5-star standard I've put, instead of a bullet point, a star. And then that writing is bigger, it's bolder, because I want that bit to stand out. Are we ready now to move on to the third part of the VisualDoodle Note-Taking? And the third part is actually all to do with triangles. I'm going to put that star there. You can see I caught my hand as I was drawing that. So that arrow was a bit wonky, but it doesn't really matter. It's about getting the message across. And this third star is to do with triangles. So again, as that's the title, we're going to go around the letters twice to make the lettering stand out. And always adjust it as well. If you write something and the letter size looks a bit too big or a bit too small, You can sometimes adjust it by going around it a second time. Now, triangles. Oh, does anybody else love threes? And the power of three. So I've got three lines radiating out from that. I actually do a workshop, visual marketing workshop, all about threes, because threes are everywhere. Whether you realize it, whether they're hidden in plain sight, you use threes in design and display. So you often see things stacked or displayed as threes and in triangular shapes. You get three in art and design and photography. So you might have used the rule of thirds. And actually on our cameras, that's where you've got two vertical and two horizontal lines. That's a way of composition, you know, when you're composing a picture. And then threes are also used in storytelling. So speakers often will use the structure of using threes. So we're listening out for that and we're forming our own patterns, our own structures. So to do that, what I'm going to do is put a box around the word structure. And then if I just put a line under the bottom and off to one side, that almost looks like it's 3D again. It looks like you've got a shadow happening. In terms of structure for what we're doing, we started off the title. So I put the title in the middle, which is the most important thing. To be honest, it isn't quite the most important thing, because all of the little things that you're going to share around the edge is the important messages, the important ideas. But actually, the title gives it structure. And if you look at a page, if you read an article, anything like that, it normally starts with a title if we think about hierarchy. So again, I'm going to draw my little impact bubble around that. So that's going to go around the edge. And then I'm going to do those pow lines coming out from that, because everything radiates out from that. And if you want to mind map, you can actually put little arrows on the end of that and radiate out from the central thing. So when we write things, we will do a title and then we'll do a subtitle. That's about hierarchy. Subtitle will tell you a bit more about it. And then adding a name. Now, on the day 17, because I didn't know that the person was introduced first, sometimes before the title, if I go to another event and I do know if I've got the program, what I might do is I might fill in the title or the person's name before I get there. So I've kind of got some structure before I start. Now, when I was talking about storytelling and structure, and when we go to triangles and the power of three, I want to show you something really cool. Yeah. So if you draw a circle there, a little dot, one is a dot. Two, if you draw two of them, you join them together, you end up with a straight line. But actually, if you do a third dot and you join them together, three dots make a triangle. Doesn't matter where you put them on the page, unless they're a complete straight line, it will always form a triangle when you join the three dots. And actually, another thing that I teach is the Goldilocks principle in visual marketing. If you did put them as a three line, the dots, it's that thing about with Goldilocks and the three bears. Was it too, too hot or too cold, or the middle one's just right? So this is about structure. And if you think about threes are really stable structures. So if you had a stool with one leg, that would be really hard to balance on. Two legs, probably fall over. Three-legged stool is very balanced. That's why you have tripods. Threes, yeah. We can have another discussion on threes. But when people if you're a speaker and you're constructing what your talk's going to be about, then often it comes in three parts. There will be a start, there will be a middle, and there will be an end. So that's what we're listening out for as we're making notes. And then along that journey, there is going to be these key points that they're going to share with you that you will think, I need to remember that. And if you need to remember that, they're the things that you're probably going to write down. I'm going to put little ticky boxes there because, again, it's to remember them, but it's what you want to remember. Doesn't mean you have to remember every word. However, what I do find is when I do visual doodle notes, I can often replay somebody's speech back to them because I've got the key points noted down. And you'll also see from a structure point of view as well, this is kind of almost like I'm taking you on a journey. So I can replay in my head what was said when. And like I said with my TEDx talk, speakers are often, they're leaving you with gifts. The gifts that they're leaving you with is the sharing their knowledge with you, the sharing ideas, the sparking ideas in your mind. So what gifts are they leaving with you? And often it's about sharing words of wisdom. Now, another thing that I learned way back at school, we used to call it the 66s and the 99s, speech marks, but it was very simply 66 and 99s. So if you want to highlight words of wisdom, quotes, remember quotes that somebody said, again, back to hierarchy and structure, might be that you just do those little symbols around it to make that thing stand out. Okay, so we're going to move on to the fourth point here. And this moves on from triangles and threes really well because it's about repetition. And again, you know, we're repeating things here. I'm getting you to do the title, put the double line, put the serifs on the end. I've asked you to draw another star. So the more that we repeat and do things, the easier that it gets. A lot of speeches are made up of three things that gets repeated. Why is it that we say location, location, location? You know, why do I have to repeat that 3 times? And in storytelling, so many stories with threes, you know, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, this pattern making stuff. So if you're listening to a talk, quite often there's patterns within that. It's happening, this repetition. And actually, again, it's something I teach with visual marketing. I normally get ask people to say, finish off this sentence. And you might want to put this in the chat. So if I was to say, blood, sweat, what word or words follow on from blood, sweat as a famous quote? It's interesting. Blood, sweat and tears. That's what you're all writing. Do you actually know who said that? Does anybody know who said that? Should have brought my little bit of prop with me because I'm freestyling this. So I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but right. Okay. So it was Winston Churchill, but actually you see it all of the time. Maybe not so much now, but if you look at a £5 note, it's got his face on and it says this quote. But did you know that that's not actually what he said? He said, I have nothing to give or offer, I think it is, but blood, toil, tears and sweat. But over the years, we've knocked out one of those words. We've knocked out toil, blood, sweat and tears. Because it's that repetition, it's that pattern making, it's that kind of, you know, it's almost like beats of a music. So repetition is really important to when you're listening to talks, but also when you're doodling. because what we're doing here is you're making up your visual vocabulary. And I've got so many visual, almost like a vocabulary in my head that's like a dictionary, but in my head. You see, when I hear words, I see pictures. So, I can easily recall what that visual vocabulary looks like. And, I can teach you those words, but it would take a lot longer than today. But for example, what I've done there is drawn a box around it and put some lines at the top and at the side. This is now representing a book, but it could represent the word story or tale. Now, you can draw a book like that, but you could also draw a book like this, like an open book. Now, again, an open book might be a metaphor. It might be a metaphor for something that people are telling you. You can also draw a book on its side. So a book on its side might be more like a library book, a book on a shelf. And then again, instead of the writing, you could do a little squiggle to represent the writing. Or it might be that the book is lying flat on the table. Now, some of these are a bit harder to draw because this is when we'll start doing perspective. But it doesn't matter. From that oblong to the perspective book or the open book, they're all books. Especially if I tell myself or I tell you that they're a book. So that repetition means that you've got that visual vocabulary, that visual dictionary that you can, when you hear a word, you can then draw something. So if I hear something and somebody says, oh, I want to tell the story about, going back to being a child, I might then just put that symbol of a book. So the fifth star. The fifth star is about focal point. Now, in visual marketing, it's what grabs our attention. It's where we look first. So if somebody's trying to sell you something or tell you something, they're going to want to grab your attention. In fact, my business is called Create Intrigue. It's about grabbing the attention of your target audience. So what does this speaker want to share with you? What does the speaker want to teach you? What's the focal point? What is it that we're listening out for? So if we do the little dot there, that's like a point, kind of radiating out from that, it's almost like beaming out. And again, lines like that, if you go back to cartoons, they're the things that feel like they're making a movement happen. Has anybody heard of Simon Sinek? He's got quite a famous talk about start with why, and then things radiate out from that. So I draw a target here. So the main point might be the start with why in the center. Obviously, there's other stuff radiating out from that. So the question is, when somebody's talking or you're making visual notes, what grabs your attention? What feels like it's important for you to write down? Because you won't be writing every single word, unless you're transcribing something. It's about remembering those ideas, things that they're going to share with you, the gifts that they're going to give you. So what are those? What are the key points that you need to know? So this is the journey that we've been on. And that's the 5-star standard. Let's do a little recap. What is this all about? What are the benefits of VisualDoodle Note-Taking? So let's go back to cartoons. And we're going to do that impact bubble this time, but this one's a bit sharper. This one's more like an explosion going off, because everything's going to radiate out from this. So what are the benefits? Well, it's back to that active learning, active listening. The word active, let's do those little lines coming off it a bit like the light bulbs. active learning. And I'm going to underline that. Instead of going across the letters twice, I'm going to underline that. And then, for me, it's all about having fun. And I'm going to connect the dots for that, because for me, my life is about having fun. I mean, this room that I'm in now, I call it my imagination studio. You know, I hold on to that childlike curiosity because I think life's too short to not have fun. And you can see how here I'm changing the exclamation marks and making a happy smiley face with that. It's about tapping into your creativity, because I believe that we're all creative. This is what I talk about in my TEDx talk. We're all creative. We're creative in different ways. And the myth busting that I do with that is quite often people will say to me, oh, I'm not creative. Probably because somebody's told them that, or they maybe think they can't draw. But actually, creative can be problem solving. It can be gardening. It can be baking a cake, writing a book. That's all creative. It's tapping into your creative self. What we're doing when we're doing this stuff is it's about igniting ideas. Being creative, sharing ideas, sharing stories, ignites ideas. So let's draw again this light bulb. And what you might find is by the time you're drawing your light bulb now, it's getting a bit easier because you've started with that repetition of drawing it. And as we're going along, what we're doing is we're trying to simplify information. We're not writing down every single word. We're just writing down the key points that we want to remember. And then I'm going to use those arrows to connect that, because these are the benefits that come from VisualDoodle Note-Taking. And there's actually a lot more than that. But the main thing here, so we're going to tick this box. It's creating a one-page visual summary. And hopefully when you've done this, what I'd love you to do, what I encourage you to do, is actually put this somewhere where you're going to see it regularly. Because when you have a one-page summary, you can stick it on the back of a door, leave it on the desk. Keep it somewhere where you're going to remember. And it's much easier to do. Maybe you want to put it on the fridge. It's much easier to remember things when it's all on one sheet rather than pages and pages. So what we're doing here is we're tapping into that visual thinking, but also the act of writing. You know, for me, I believe that something magical happens between our hands. Sorry, between our head and our hands. And I think it's quite intuitive because it goes through our hearts as well. Might have got told off as a child for daydreaming, looking out the window, or doodling. I mean, I know some people hate this thought, but a lot of my books, the books that I've got, I do write in the margins, I underline things, I draw things as it sparks ideas. But I know some people are like, you don't write in books. But I do, because I feel like it brings the books to life. But that visual thinking, what we're doing is we're trying to make things a bit more memorable, because we've got a lot of things going on in our heads and lots of things that we'll have to remember. For me, making them visual makes it easier to remember. So I'm going to put these in little think bubbles, little clouds. And then we're going to have the little dots coming off from that. It can also make it a bit more accessible. So, you know, when we're writing, it's to do with the language. Now, I've got a visual vocabulary, a visual language here. Might be if you don't speak English or you don't speak French, that kind of thing. But I'd like to suggest that visual notes, even if you don't speak the language, somebody could probably interpret, have a good go at understanding what this was about using the visual language. And actually from an accessible point of view, quite a lot of the clients that I work with, identify as being neurodiverse. And yeah, you know, my superpower is visually communicating ideas, so I'll probably join that crowd as well. Because it's about connecting ideas. It's about connecting the dots. It's about connecting people and their ideas. So let's draw me here. And let's draw you there. Because what we've been doing today, I'm going to get you to draw your light bulbs again. Been sharing ideas, been sharing light bulb moments. And hopefully what I've done is I've planted those ideas into your head, transformed an idea by actually breathing life into it, by actually talking about it and also writing it down. I've taken those ideas from my head and I've planted them in your head. And then if you've been writing them down, you've put them onto paper and you can actually pass that baton on. Because I believe that the purpose is about sharing ideas. Doesn't matter how good your drawing is. It's about being able to share ideas. It's also about being able to recall ideas. And that thing about the mastermind, something Napoleon Hill talks about, when there's two people sharing ideas, actually there's more things that happen. It's like having the mastermind in the room, because this is how new ideas get generated. So let's zoom back in. So I've been, and I am, Anne English. I've been your teacher today. I've been your guide. And if you want to know more about me, if you want to watch my TEDx talk, we'll add a little bit onto the end of that, .co.uk. So that's where you can find us. We used to, can you remember a time when we used to always say www. Before anything, but now we don't have to say that. You know, so that shorthand, it's come down. So with annenglish.co.uk, I'm going to go back, we'll open it up to questions. But one thing that I do want to say is if we put a backslash and put a 17 after that, I have got a survey, a feedback form that I'd love you to fill in, because I'd like to get your feedback on this so that, you know, I can take it forward, see what connected with you, what you'd like to learn more about. So yeah, that was all about the 5-star standard. I'm going to stop sharing that one for now. So when I do doodles for clients, I often create, as part of their promo pack, a 1-minute video. And what it means is within that 1 minute, you can kind of quickly recall in your mind. So I'm going to play you this video and you should be able to recall what I've been saying to you as we've gone on this journey. There we go. That's the journey that we've been on together. And it's yeah, I've enjoyed spending time with you as well. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'll put another background up and then yeah, just open up the chat. I do have these little signs that I've made where I can ask questions or light bulbs or give people a thumbs up or give people a thumbs down or ask the question, give them a round of applause or some love. So, but what you've got is on the bottom of Zoom, you've got the reaction bit where you can actually put your hand up, or if you want to, just unmute yourself if you've got any questions that I can help you with, or pop it in the chat. Who wants to start? Who wants to go first? Hey, Sarah.
Oh, that was so amazing, Anne. Thank you very
You're
much.
very welcome.
My brain's going, oh, what can I do now? Um, I was going to ask a few things. One
Yeah.
thing was, do you ever doodle in color? Because I'm quite when I write notes, I
Yeah.
tend to write if there's things that I need to highlight, I will write them in red or in a different color. Do you ever
Yes.
do that?
So colours are really good. And I do another, a full masterclass on branding and colour and stuff, because different colours react to the senses in different ways. So yeah, red will make something stand out, but quite often as well at school, the red pen that you used to get, things kind of stuff.
Bad marks.
Yeah. But then red for love, for hearts and things like that. So you can relate a bit like that key where the key was, drop an A or a B in the chat. You can use colour as a way of identifying stuff. When I do notes, I tend to do black and white. This is the reason why my ideas book is all black and white. The cover's black and white. It's not because on the back there's a colour picture of me, but I did it purposely so that people could colour it in, because I think there's something quite mindful, about sitting there with a coloured pencil. So it could be that what you do is you make the notes in black and white, but you go back later to go through it, to recall it while it's still fresh, and then add the colours. It depends on time scale, have you got time to change pens? But it might be that you do when you make a note, and what you're doing is you're creating your own, almost like a visual vocabulary, that hierarchy, aren't you? Kind of
Yeah.
saying, well, red could be for important, or might be a traffic light system, where you use red for something that you need to stop, and amber's get ready, and green for go. So yeah, you can use coloured pencils, but as a creative, and that thing about overload as well, thinking and doodling and listening, and there's a lot going on. So for me, I simplify it. I think it was Stephen Jobs that used to only wear a black polo neck, and there are some thought leaders that actually wear very similar clothes all of the time, and actually so do I. I quite often I wear scarves or a necklace. And that's kind of like, it's my brand identity, my identity, but it takes a decision making process out of the situation. So, Steve Jobs could think about, what he was creating. He didn't have to always think about, what am I going to wear today? So that's what I would say, with the type of pens, because again, you can have thicker markers and thinner markers. And so you can create like that. And you might see other people, their style of visual note taking is very much drawn with colours, but this is the way that I do it. And that's why I do it like that.
Yes, okay. Now I put a few in gold, so the things that I really wanted to stand
Ooh,
out,
I
I did
like a
add
gold
a little
pen.
bit of gold.
I love it. I love it.
And the other thing I wanted to ask quickly was just what do you use? Obviously, you use your iPad a
Yeah.
lot, but what do you use? Is there like do you pay extra for the what you're
So on the
using?
iPad, right? So this is really interesting. So that's,
Yeah,
when I said I normally would go to an event with a notepad and paper, and I'd write my notes. And then what happened was, so we're talking back to January 2020. So before we knew the craziness that was about to come. I went to an event, and Nicola Jane Little, who was the speaker. So some of you might have come across her with Mint Business Club in the Northeast. Anyway, Nicola was the speaker. What happened was, a few days before that, I was doing my accounts. Now, they should have been in earlier, but I was getting my accounts ready, for the end of January. And what I did when I was going through it, I saw that I had bought an app called Procreate. So I did a little bit of kind of like backtrack and traced it back, and I realized that Procreate was a program, a drawing program on the iPad. So when I went to that event with Nicola, and I'd already planted the seed that I was going to somehow illustrate my TEDx talk, and I'd applied to do a TEDx talk, but I didn't know I'd been accepted. I thought, oh, well, if I've got this thing that I've paid for, I'm going to try and use it. So when she was talking, instead of drawing it on my notebook, I drew it on the iPad. So I was using an app called Procreate. Now, Procreate can do so many fancy things. That's what I was using today. It's got layers, it's got colors, it's got different types of pen. I mean, when I did that first drawing, I didn't know how to add colors or pens or anything. I mean, I found the Ruby Out tool, but I didn't know how to do layers, none of that. So actually it started off with the black and white. And you know what? I've got limited knowledge of that. Sometimes when I do commissions, I will add brand colors. But I don't do all of the fancy drawing on there. So there is an app called Procreate that, you can use on an iPad with, I've got an iPad and Apple Pencil. But use what's best for you, because I don't use a lot of those things. But you know how
sometimes they're too fancy and you just need to be simple, don't you?
Yeah, for me, it's keep it simple, because it's about capturing an idea. It's not about how good it's drawn or what colors you use, really. But you can use colors to reinforce the idea. Yeah.
Love. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I see that Claire wants to ask a question. We've got hands up, Claire.
Yeah. Just quickly, I think you've mentioned both pencils and pens. What do you find you prefer using, pens, pencils, a mixture of both?
Do you know what? It is a mixture of both, because sometimes on the iPad, because I can rub out and enlarge and tidy things up, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So I can go into that editing and overthink. It's a bit like, when you write a book and it's just like, get the words out. But we're writing words, aren't we? And then we're editing the words. And before we know it, we're not writing, we're actually editing it and filtering. And, the first stage is just getting it out of your head. So actually, I don't often use pencils because I would probably overthink. I would probably be hard on myself. I mean, my TEDx talk is about the thread that runs through it is your self-talk will determine if your ideas become a reality. So often that little monkey mind can say, oh, that's not good enough. That doesn't look right. That blah, 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 blah. So if I've got a pencil with a rubber on the end, I'll write something and then I'll probably rub it out and do it again and rub it out, and, so that's why sometimes I quite like to put pen to paper, because even if I have to cross it out, today when I drew that, some of the stuff wasn't perfect. Did it matter? I was communicating the message. So whatever feels comfortable to you, because for me, I've always drawn with these, like what I would call these magical pens, these signs.
I like those. Yeah.
So I'm going to reach over here. When I did Christmas displays in shopping centres, for example, it was all about me planting an idea in somebody else's mind. Can you see that? I would draw the sketch and I would always use those pens.
Yeah.
And then I would give that to the studio and then they would illustrate it and come back with the coloured visual.
Ah, okay.
But it started off with me, and I'm disappearing. It started off with me and the ideas. So you can see how it goes, and that's the stuff that they would then throw in the bin. I just happened to keep this one. But that was always my process.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like whatever feels comfortable to you. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I wouldn't like to tell you there's a right or wrong way.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that I can help you with, or?
Anne, would you mind sharing your the link to your TEDx talk in Team 17, please, just so people.
Awesome. And actually, I'll set you a challenge. Doodle along to my TEDx talk. That needs to be another stream where we sit and because I could do that. I could do a watch party, couldn't I, with my TEDx talk, and you all sit there and doodle along. That would be an interesting one. So yeah, so if there's any questions, obviously you can put them in there. If you'd like to share your doodles, I would love to see them. However, it's not about that comparison thing. You know, if you want to drop them in Team 17, I'm sure would love to see them. But please, you know, I showed my first visual doodle and I thought that was rubbish. It's not about comparison. It's just about what key points did you take from this? So yeah, finally, this feedback form. I'd love to hear from you. You know, what did you like? What do you want to know more about? All of that kind of thing. So I've made it quite simple to remember. So it's just anenglish.co.uk/17, and that'll take you to a Google form. Keep doodling. Just keep. I think it sounds a bit like the dancing, doesn't it? Just keep dancing. Just keep doodling. And I'd love to see what you create. Yeah, I'll see you in Team 17.
Thank you, Anne. That was amazing.
Thanks, Anne.
Brilliant. You're very welcome.
You.
You're very welcome. I'm gonna wave bye.
Thank
to
you.
all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.